Hi guys, welcome into the Shadow Box. I am Carlise. I am your grief and trauma coach, along with your shadow work guide. Today on the Shadow Box, we have Reshma Kearney, and she is a grief and mindfulness mentor. She is also a mental health advocate. She has a master's in public health, and she is a mindfulness educator for children. She is also continuing her training in trauma-informed yoga, and she will be completing that pretty soon here, Reshma. So
hmm
welcome in and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Carlise. I think you covered it all. We're here to talk about my grief journey, and that started, well, I think knowing what I know about grief, I've definitely experienced grief at multiple points in my life.
Yeah.
But the grief journey that I share publicly and that has been the most life-changing is that came after losing my husband to suicide in 2022.
Okay.
And so um, I'm currently sharing my story, his story, and our family's experiences to kind of highlight the importance of mental health and the importance of recognizing challenges in mental health and realizing that everybody's going through something. And so we should treat those challenges and people who have those challenges with kindness and compassion.
Yeah, and just kind of learning how to meet them where they are. And I know that when we had spoken prior to this, there was no you really didn't know that this was coming on. Like there were some things that were happening throughout the years, but you didn't realize that it was at this particular point until it actually came to a head. And that's
Right.
that's the surprising thing about suicide, um, and especially the mental health of men, which we're going to get into as well. Um, so let's go ahead and talk about your husband and tell me your husband's name.
His name is Sean.
Sean. So let's go ahead and talk about Sean and his mental health challenges that you later learned about, and also what you've seen throughout the years that you just kind of didn't put a finger on.
Yeah. And I would say we didn't learn about his mental health challenges later. When he died, I didn't learn then. You know,
Okay.
I knew. We were married for almost 17 years, and I would say throughout that time together, I knew there was depression and anxiety. He might have mentioned it here and there, not to the extent of what it was, but
Mhm.
I knew there were mental health challenges. And it was almost like every year we had one moment where he fell into a very dark place and he would lean on me and I would get him out of that place. And over time, I started noticing that that downward cycle became darker, um, more intense, and I felt like in the past few years before he passed away, it would take him longer to get out of that space.
Okay.
Um, and I know that he had childhood struggles, and as an adult, he also faced a lot of emotional challenges. But I don't think I really knew the extent of it. And even today, I don't think I fully know what happened in his life that got him to this place. But unfortunately, every year that he would get into that space, he would ignore the severity of it. And he would ignore my requests to go see a therapist, get on medication, ask colleagues for a break or go to friends. He
So
thought that he was fine.
it was really switched then. So he wouldn't acknowledge the severity of it, but you already knew the intensity of it. And
Yeah.
so once it got to a head, obviously that's when he decided to take his life because that intensity that he denied all that time, it was just did its thing at that time.
Yeah.
That's the scary part about it.
It's really scary,
Yeah.
and it makes the campaign look for the signs that bothers me, and I try to advocate for suicide loss survivors
Mhm.
because it's really hard to hear that. I get it. I do think and I do know that a lot of people who have thought about suicide are more vocal about it, or their signs are more easily seen.
Mhm.
But in his case, there were no signs of this decision, this, you know, ending of everything. He was a go-getter, never gave up, a lieutenant colonel, orthopedic surgeon in the Army,
Mhm.
pushed through always. And so this was the ultimate giving up, and I never thought this would happen.
It's interesting how you said there was never any signs of this intensity of it or this part of giving up. And it almost makes you wonder, the signs that you were seeing were that intense. It was getting to the point where you knew that this was dark enough where this could possibly happen. But if the other person is denying it, if the other person is not letting you into that space to get that help, what do you do with that?
Right.
Because it's like, in the back of your mind, you're probably thinking, like, I hope my husband makes it out of this in one piece. I hope that I can help him through this. But when you have that other person that's just like, no, I'm fine. No, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, I'm crying today. No, I'm not feeling well today. Thank you for being by my side. You know, all of that is just kind of swept under the rug until it comes back again. And it's
Yeah.
like, you being a wife, it's not like you could have made him go and seek the help, like go get help.
Yeah, you can't. I'm
Yeah.
5 feet tall, 110 pounds, and he was 6 feet, and a big guy. And
Yeah.
no, I if I could have lifted him up and taken him into a therapist's office, I would have. If I could have called his colleagues and asked for help, I would have. But see, unfortunately, we're still living in a world where we have to show the best version of
Mhm.
ourselves and our family and our home. And, I would have loved to have been among some of the military wives or orthopedic surgeons' wives and said, hey, I'm having a hard time at home. My husband's struggling. I need help. What do I do? But you never feel comfortable enough to do that,
Yeah.
no matter
Especially
how
because of
close
his
you
rank.
are to people.
Yeah. And his rank pretty high?
Yeah, but by the time he separated from the Army, he was a lieutenant colonel.
Okay. Okay.
So he did have that fear of judgment,
Mhm.
um, the expectation in the military and in the medical fields the expectations are to push through, to be resilient. You're supposed to take care of other people, so you don't have time to stop and take care of yourself.
Right. And then just the aspect of him being a man.
Of course, yeah.
Men's mental health and how they handle it is always totally different. You have a handful of men who are very much in touch with their emotions, very much in touch with knowing that they need to decompress and how to do it. But there's that other stigma in the world of saying, if you go to therapy, if you can't let everyone in because I'm supposed to be the man, I'm the protector, I'm the provider. I can't show weakness. And it's like you're suffering on the inside and you can't be strong for me or your family or your kids. And we haven't talked about the children yet. Um,
Hmm.
you can't be strong for us because you're suffering. And we are only seeing the repercussions of what you won't let me help you with.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's okay. So with that, how did he, even though he wouldn't go to therapy and you were there by his side, did you see any ways that he was trying to help himself throughout the depression?
Yeah, I did. He was an avid skier and loved all things outdoors. And so I saw that, he would push himself to get up in the morning, get out for a run, go hiking. One of the reasons we were in the military, and we started off in Washington State, and then the Army moved us to the South. And one of the reasons he got out of the Army before the 20-year mark is because he felt like if he could just get himself back to Washington State, where he could have that access, that easy access to all the things he loved to do,
Mm-hmm.
he would be better. He would be in a better place.
Yeah.
And the irony of that is we separated from the Army in 2021, moved to Washington State, and 9 months later, he took his own life. So I saw these things that he thought were going to make him feel better, getting outside, living where he can do that all the time, freedom from the Army, making more money in the civilian world. But those are just temporary fixes.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't do the internal work. And that I've been practicing mindfulness since years before he passed away. I've taught the kids how to do it. And I would always try to encourage him to join us. And I think the most I got him to do was hot yoga. I could get him to go to yoga with me. But then that he was looking at that as this is helping with flexibility for skiing. It wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
you never connected it to the mind and the being. So
Yeah.
I think he tried, he just couldn't dig deeper.
Yeah. But what you had mentioned earlier about his childhood and things that were going on back then that he didn't know how to deal with. He didn't have the support that he needed to get through those things. And so when we say dig deeper, it's digging deeper than more than just I'm having a bad day at work,
Oh,
or
yeah.
I have these responsibilities, and I'm overwhelmed. These are deeper issues, that
Oh,
familial issues that he couldn't change,
yeah.
and things that were being passed down to him that he didn't understand, or that he grew to resent, in a sense that it just built up the anger, it built up the depression, it built up the anxiety. And here he is, sounds like that he was a man of distraction. So I have all of these things. I have all the distractions. I have the wife, I have the kids, I have the home, I have the military. Everyone's dependent on me. I don't have to go there. But he did. Because
Yeah.
no matter what you do or where you go, it's still in your head. And he couldn't escape that. And that's the part that took him out.
Yeah. And the distraction piece is something that I recognized just in the final few months of his life. It
Mm-hmm.
was actually a light bulb moment for me. We were out on the lake on our boat, and he was blasting his music. And after a while, I get tired of it. I can't
Yeah.
handle it. And I said to him, I'm so surprised that somebody who loves nature as much as you wants to be out here on this beautiful lake in the Seattle area and not listen to the natural sounds.
Yeah.
And then it just clicked that I get it now. You can't sit quietly. You can't
Mm-hmm.
sit in your feelings. And so you need this constant movement and sound and motion to distract yourself. So you're right. All those big picture things, all the things, that you put down on paper, those were distractions.
Yeah. How did so now we kind of fast forward, because I know that when you had originally reached out, we were talking about the shadow, and we started talking about the children and how they were starting to kind of cope with what happened to dad, and even yourself, as far as what have I picked up from this,
Mm-hmm.
and before we go into that, let's talk about no let's go ahead and go into that. So what have you now learned about yourself, that you didn't really pick up on when your husband was here? What have you noticed about yourself?
I think what I've learned about myself is just how resilient I am.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you're not born with resilience. You have to learn resilience. And we talk about teaching our children resilience and building resilience, but your resilience isn't actually proven to you until you go through some hard stuff in life. And I I think I've always had resilience. I think living with somebody who has mental health challenges that are mismanaged and being in the military world, I had to have resilience to get through all those years. But it's now that I'm learning more about that resilience because it's all on me now. So, I his mental health affected my mental health,
Mhm.
but in a way, because I was supporting him in his mental health, maybe that, I don't know, masked it a little bit for me. But now it's like everything I feel and see and do, it's very raw because it's just me. All the focus is on me and the children.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that you were kind of worried because of the anger that he would that he had prior to him leaving. And you were worried that maybe you had picked up on some of that. Talk to me about
Yeah. Yeah. In his final few months, the anger was out of control, the
that.
outbursts, the unpredictability, when he'd come home. Um, and I do sometimes fear that I'm taking on that intensity of anger because I'm a stay-at-home mom with three children, and I have a lot going on. They have a lot going on emotionally and mentally. So, of course, I'm going to lose patience. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to raise my voice. And there are moments where I catch myself the way in which I'm showing up and showing anger, the words I'm choosing to use. And I do worry that I'm taking on some of his anger. Um, and I just have to, in that moment, take a break. And the next day, I always bring it up with the kids. There was one time when this was earlier on. I think I've done a lot of work on myself to get to a better place. But earlier on, my son did say, "You're starting to act like dad," or "You're getting angry or treating me like dad did." And that kind of woke me up to the reality.
Yeah. And with that being said, as you step back and kind of reevaluate the way that you're coming across, it's also important for you to separate yourself from the trauma. Separate yourself from what your husband's character was prior to him passing away or years prior to that, right? Because at any given time, as a parent, you're going to have anger. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to be annoyed. You're going to be irritated. So that question is it above what is normal, or is it a little, is it just because you're a tired parent, because you're
Mm-hmm.
exhausted? And you have to give yourself permission to parent. You have to give
Mm-hmm.
yourself permission to feel and to have those emotions. And it's a good thing that you do go back and talk to your children, the next day or what have you, not necessarily talking to them from the aspect of regret or I'm sorry, but talking to them from the aspect of this is what you did, and this is how we felt about it, and this is the repercussions that you get from it. And
Yeah.
I was irritated. I was a little annoyed. I was angry that you did that. I was frustrated, whatever words that you want to use. But we can't allow for the loss of your husband to dictate, in a sense, the impact of your discipline,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
So it's about, so how I approach it is I'm just very matter of fact with the kids. I'm very open and honest. So sometimes it's not even about this is what you did and this is the consequence. It's about this is where I was mentally when this happened, which is usually something they did. And it, this is how I should have handled it, which includes the discipline that, they kind of deserve, but also highlights how I might have overreacted and why. So I try to just be very open and transparent with them about my feelings. And it's gotten to a point where now they know when I'm going to be more stressed than normal, or what things are going to trigger me,
Yeah.
and not. So it's a hard balance. I think it's a hard balance with or without mental health involved. When you lose a parent, when you lose a spouse, and then you're raising children, you want to be soft, but you also have to be tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go into that. How has it been with your grieving and parenting? How has that correlated with itself and unfolded?
It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Times three, because I have three children who are also grieving. I think I have learned balance. It's taken me a while to get here. Initially, I just jumped into fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
and it it was like, who cares about my grief? Who cares about my healing?
Right.
I don't need to find joy. I need to protect my babies, and I need to bring normalcy back into their life. And I did that for a few months, and then ultimately burnt myself out. I was resentful, bitter, and it went against what I was trying to do. I was bringing a negative energy into this safe space that I was trying to create for the kids. So I realized that I had to bring back in my mindfulness practices that I had always leaned on during challenging and uncertain times, and really give myself time to heal so that I could help them heal. And actually, around that same time, I had read somewhere that the outcomes for children who face trauma are largely dependent upon the coping skills and resilience of their mother. And that changed my perspective quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say with that, because I do know some fathers who are widowed. So I would say just with the parent period, whichever surviving parent that you have, their coping mechanisms and how they see you, how the children see you get through the day or handle certain things or organize certain things. It helps them to kind of, at least because they're kids, keep some things in the back of their head for perspective of how I'm supposed to manage myself. And it's one of those things of remembering when they need to remember, when they need to pull it out. But definitely that role model, that influence is everything. At the same time, like you did say as well, being transparent with them, they have to understand the realness of it too, the reality of the
Yeah.
hurt, the pain, the days where mom is sad, the days where everything just seems chaotic, with
Mm-hmm.
themselves or with you.
Yeah. That's really important. Sharing how I feel at any given moment. I always say the good, the bad, the ugly, any emotion. I'm not afraid to share that with them and
Yeah.
to talk about it. And I think it's really helped them sit with their emotions and share with me. And that's been the most important part of healing, is just knowing where they're at all times, and knowing that they know it's safe to share with me.
Yeah. Question: do you think that, are you afraid of becoming codependent with your children?
Um, I have been. I've recognized that. It and that moment was, almost a year ago. I they My parents had them for a night, and at night it was great. I appreciated the quiet and the alone time. But the next morning I noticed anxiety, and I couldn't quite figure out what was happening. I mean, I knew they were safe. They were with my parents a mile away, and I was in the
Mhm.
house alone. But that's when I realized that this anxiety is them not being with me during a time of the day, of the week that they normally are. So when they're at school, I don't feel anxiety. I actually look forward to that.
Yeah.
Um, when they're in bed, I don't feel it. But this was a Saturday or Sunday night, morning,
Hmm.
when they're usually with me, and I noticed that I was feeling that way. So I'm not afraid of it now because I've recognized that, and I'm doing things to make sure that we all have our own space. So
Yeah.
I've even seen codependency between my girls because
Mhm.
they're 10 and 9.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing things gently to kind of create more space between them so that they have other outlets and other connections.
Give me an example of what you see them demonstrating within their codependency.
Uh, I I don't I can't recall specific instances, but it's more of a general observation, just the two of them wanting to be together all the time, their nighttime routine where they say good night and I love you, and they talk to each other from their bedrooms, and um, over breaks when we are together more, I notice that going to school is a little more of a transition for them, and they'll look out for each other. I'll hear from them that they looked out for each other at school. I went by, sister went by another sister's classroom, or um, one will go off to her activity and come home, and the other one will hug her at the door. So it's very sweet, but I'm also just mindful of how close they are because they are 2 school years apart and they won't be in the same school ever again after one more year.
Yeah. I would say, because sometimes we want to manage the situation as how we would manage ourselves, as adults, as parent to children, that codependent part. But I would say for the girls or for the kids, period, if this is the way at their age and at their stage that they are showing up for each other and really trying to console, because we don't know, as even though you're their mother, their little hearts and their little minds are
Hmm.
not the same as ours. And
Right.
so the way that they are dealing with and coping with dad's death, that's their special thing.
Hmm.
And I would say, don't worry about it right now. Let them be how they're going to be and let them get through. Because if you pull them apart right now, even if it's subtle, pulling them apart right now will make them feel as if they're losing something else. Right now, they're clenching on to each other because of the uncertainty, and they're
Hmm.
so close in age where it's quite natural that they would kind of gravitate towards each other. Um, so I would really say, don't worry about it. Let them
Yeah.
just be. Yeah. Now let's go into the shadow of your kids, because that was another thing that we spoke about. And you were worried about how they are starting to develop their character or personalities or just their behaviors from dad. Talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think not so much for the girls, but for my son, I
Mhm.
think that sometimes he's 12 and a half. He's going to be 13 in March. And he is a lot like his dad. He does share a lot of the good things that his dad had. But I think sometimes my son feels that holding on to, I don't know how to word this, but I think sometimes my son feels that even holding on to or carrying out the not so positive qualities is his way of holding on to the relationship with dad. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Give me an
well,
example.
yeah. So, for example, anger.
Okay.
Again, he's 12 and a half. He's a boy. I had put him in therapy before Sean passed away for anger because I did notice he had a harder time managing anger and frustration at, I think he was 10. And I thought therapy might help. And so now, of course, there's anger. And I never tell my children they're not allowed to feel any emotion, but I tell them they have to learn how to manage each emotion in the most healthy and respectful way. And so there have been times where I've seen anger in my son, and then we talk about it, and he will make a comment like, well, I'm like dad.
Okay.
I get angry. And then he'll maybe describe a moment in which dad got angry or something he
Mhm.
heard about dad getting angry. And so I wonder sometimes if he feels like, you know, I get angry. This is who I am, and this is what connects me to dad. I got this from dad. And if I don't hold on to this, then I'm not like dad.
Yeah. I specifically remember us talking about that, and it was interesting that he would say, "You're acting like dad, mom. You're
Yeah.
angry. You're acting like dad." And I remember telling you that, even though he is 12, he's still at that age where he can be manipulative,
Mm-hmm.
and using that against you to get his way, or using that against you to kind of pull your emotions in, where you go and start overcompensating, and
Mm-hmm.
explaining yourself and trying to make sure he understands and I love you and I'm here for you. And that's that area where I would really say tread lightly, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe you don't need to explain that part to him, but you need to explain, this is what you did, and this is why. And so I can only imagine, as a parent, that you're, like you said, you want to be soft and you want to be stern.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, separating the trauma and realizing what you're dealing with, and
Yeah.
really setting those boundaries with him too, and letting him know you don't get excuses like that. And if you really want to be real and transparent with him, it would be a punch in the gut. But look where that got dad. Dad is no longer here with us.
Yeah.
So you don't get to display that. If you want to
Yeah.
display it in another way, then let's talk. Let's talk therapy. Or you can
Yeah.
always come to mom, because I understand your feelings, but we're going to talk it out. We're not going to behave in this way.
Yeah.
And that's setting him up to really start to understand that this world, no matter how angry you are, no matter how many people that you tell that my dad died when I was such and such age, they don't care.
I
And you
know.
don't get to act out. You get to reap the repercussions of it and the consequences. But if you don't go out into the world the way that you're supposed to, it's going to be a different story. And I can only imagine how, do you, good question here. So we know how dad was acting out when things were kind of coming down the pipe for him, and the things that he wasn't willing to say, I'm having a problem in this area. You've been there your child's whole life. So what are you seeing within him that you did see in dad, or that does definitely need to be addressed, because he's heading down this this whole path of not so goodness?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's heading down the path. I
Mm-hmm.
and only because I think I if I see a moment where I see my husband in my son,
Mm-hmm.
I freeze. We
Yeah.
stop what we're doing, whatever we're doing. I've pulled over before because I'm hearing, you know, anger or just not healthy talk, and I'll pull over and talk to him. So that's first and foremost. I don't see it going down, but I know that the path is not going to be easy with my
Yeah.
son.
And I don't
Yeah.
mean that path of of what husband did. So I really want to make sure I make that
Oh,
straight.
yeah.
I don't mean that path. I just mean the path of anger, that path.
Yeah, no, I understood. Yeah.
Okay.
So so I think it's been over 2 years, and
Mhm.
I do believe that the further we move from the exposure of that behavior,
Yeah.
the closer we get to a healthy, balanced place. And so I'm already seeing improvement in my son,
Mhm.
but there are, I think the main issue is the anger and the lack of control over the reactions to anger.
Yeah.
Um, I think when we talked last time, I mentioned control and that I was seeing he has this need for control that my husband also had. And
Mhm.
so I'm just really, I pay a lot of attention to that. Um, and I've learned over time that I can't just say, hey, calm down, chill out, you know, just relax. That never helps. So instead, I'm just sitting with him and asking him, what's going on? When you were playing that board game with your sister, why did you have to have that color and do it this way? Why couldn't you let her do it this other way? And
Mhm.
we just talk a lot more about it. And I'm seeing a little more softness in him, but I just know that this is going to be something we're going to work on for a
Yeah.
very long time. And I remind him that this is his thing that he will have to make sure he's on top of as an adult.
Yeah. When you have that conversation with him, what is his response?
The conversation about control
Yeah, like
or
why did
anger
you have
and
to have
control.
this color and
Oh, it's always his sisters don't know as much. They're younger. I'm older. I'm some depending on the situation, it could even be, well, I'm their big brother. I have to tell them how it is or show them how. Um, so he might inside think that he's actually helping or stepping in when their dad can't or protecting, but he hasn't realized that it's actually doing more harm than good, that they're not respecting it or appreciative of his efforts because of the way he's trying to help them.
yeah, I think that there's a couple of different facets that's going on there, and which is probably another reason why they link together so much too, the girls,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. But with him being kind of controlling, that's a different aspect of showing you authority. Control and authority, they do go hand in hand, but when you are saying, I have to have this particular one, I am going to throw a fit if I don't, or I'm going to whatever if I don't have this, that's an internal thing. That's an
Hmm.
internal thing of control out, and that's not an external control. And I wonder if it's because he's trying to be in control of something because he couldn't control his father not being here anymore.
Hmm.
And on top of that, the authority figure of sisters, it's he's trying to show them authority, but he's kind of inducing fear in them too. Because do
Hmm.
they trust him? Do they trust that yeah, brother would probably punch somebody if they hit me, but brother is probably going to scream at me because I didn't do X, Y, and Z for him. So it's like that fear coming on both sides.
Hmm.
And instead of being the authoritative figure, it's being the brother, being the older protective brother, the brother who shows the love to the sisters, the brother that says, I love you and I will always be there and I will protect you, things of that nature. And I would say if he's not still in therapy, he needs to go back to therapy because that's a whole
He's
big
in.
thing. Is he still
Yeah,
in therapy?
yeah, he's
Good,
in therapy.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, do you find that you are, and I want you to answer this honestly, do you find that you are a little afraid for him or a little afraid of him?
I'm afraid for him, not of him. He's a very loving, kind-hearted kid. I mean, he's thoughtful and compassionate, and I know his core is good.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I'm afraid for him. I'm afraid for all three of my kids
Yeah,
in terms of mental health, and suicide rates are at a high for children,
yeah,
and so, and their dad died by suicide. And so, yeah, of course, I'm afraid for them.
yeah. There's a lady that I'm going to send you some information on, but she actually gets resources, books and resources. She creates these resource baskets or what have you, um, for children who are grieving that have had
Mhm.
different sorts of losses in their lives. So I will connect you with her, so that they can at least have some resources to put
Oh, yeah, that'd be
some
great.
thought, put some words to their thoughts. Um, how are you doing? So we have all of this,
Hmm.
and we have you juggling everything.
Yeah,
How are you doing with your processing and your grieving? Are you starting to be able to grieve on your own?
I don't even know what that means, to grieve on your own.
Yeah.
I don't know. I every day is different. I think I have really good self-awareness. I'm able to sit and quiet my mind and pinpoint the emotions I'm feeling and take it to the next level and figure out why I'm feeling those emotions. I'm not ashamed to share that I get angry, I feel bitter, I feel sorry for myself sometimes, I get jealous. And I think sometimes it's really hard for people to notice those emotions.
Mm,
Like when you lose somebody, everybody knows you're going to be sad and heartbroken and maybe afraid, but people don't talk about the times where you're jealous or just angry and bitter. And I think the fact that I'm able to recognize those emotions in myself and work through them without judgment is is really important for my own healing. But you know, have I grieved on my own? I just don't know. I feel like this is just going to be my journey forever.
mm,
And I'll just continue to learn more and more about my grief as I
yeah.
move forward.
Yeah. And I think it's more so of the processing it, because you have, like I said, you have everything going on and you have the kids that you are mainly focused on. And so and this is a common theme throughout, everyone that I talk to, or just knowing about grief, period, is that when you have so much in your mind and you have so many things pulling at you, you don't get to sit and think about your own self. You don't really
Mhm.
get to sit in your sadness. You don't get to sit in, because if I do, how far am I going to go? Am I going to come out of this type deal? Right. And so I think a lot of the parents that I have talked to, who have lost spouses, they're like, I probably won't grieve until my children are grown, until they're out of the house and I can actually have time to myself to experience what I experienced, because it's all about taking care of them.
Yeah, and I think that's why my mindfulness practice has been so important because I've been checking in with myself even before Sean passed away.
Yeah.
I've had a morning routine that includes breath work, meditation, journaling, quiet. I carve out an hour every morning before the kids wake up. And I've been doing this long before he passed away. And
Yeah.
I think so. I think that I don't know, I guess you could say I've like micro dosed
Yeah,
grief
that's
over the
fair.
last 2 years. So
Yeah,
I'm giving myself these little moments rather than blocking out my feelings completely. And so maybe because I am giving myself these moments, then when they do leave the house, it's not going to just fall on me.
yeah,
I'm going to have more time and maybe do more healing, but it's not going to knock me off my feet.
yeah. Yeah. And speaking of the jealousy that you were speaking of, I mean, your identity was taken away from you. You thought
Hmm.
that you were going to have your family, your husband, dates, couples things, family, vacations, things of that nature. And now you don't have that. And so, are you a social person? Do you have friends? Did you guys have couple friends that you hung out with? What did that look like?
Yeah, I'm very social. He wasn't. And I think a large part of that had to do with his mental health.
Hmm.
And so we didn't have a lot of couple friends, but we had a few really good couple friends, and we didn't go out a lot. It's interesting because my world has almost just blown up since he passed away. I think because I'm able to make my own decisions and because naturally everybody in my world came to my rescue when he died. And since then, one thing loss teaches you is to really hold on to those relationships, right? And to cherish the relationships that you do have. And so, because all of these people came back into my world and helped lift me up, I've been very intentional about maintaining those relationships and connections.
Yeah. And so leading into that, is that where that jealousy comes from when you see the other couples and the families kind of doing their thing and you're just like, I'm the third wheel, or why did this happen to me? Is that where it's coming from?
Yeah, it's seeing everyone else moving forward with the plans and the dreams and the excitement that they had when they started
Yeah.
their relationships and their families. And when Sean died, we were supposed to be at the peak of our lives. He had gotten out of the army. He was going to start making real orthopedic surgeon money. We had our eyes set on different areas of Seattle and different homes, and the kids were excited. I was going to start, actually, that week, I had meetings lined up to start teaching mindfulness to children and families. And my goal was to start my own business. And when he died, all of that just got ripped away from me.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the dating world then. So now we are, because you're what, 2.5 years out?
Yes, a
Mhm.
little, close to 2.5 years. It'll be 3 years in September.
Okay. And what is your thought process on dating?
I've started to think about it.
Okay.
I'm moving into this new year. I am open to it.
Okay.
But to be honest, I'm not rushing into anything. I'm going to take my time and just leave it up to the universe for now. I just think that it's complicated given the significance of my loss, given that I have three young kids with very fragile hearts.
Yeah.
They are my priority. And so I'm just focusing on my healing, focusing on being there for the kids. And if something comes into my life right now and I feel good, great. But I'm not putting pressure on myself to follow a timeline or, expectations of the outside world.
Yeah. Um, do you think that you are going to, because of course you married your husband for many reasons, You know, he was a good guy. You knew he was going to be a provider, like all of ambition, all of that.
The
That
good on paper guy. I
the good
call
on
him
paper.
he was the good on paper guy. And where do we write about emotional intelligence on
Yeah,
our resume? You know,
yeah,
we don't. And that, yeah, I missed that.
yeah. So as you start heading back into the dating world, are you most people, and I think that's just people in general who have dated and had breakups even, but especially with a spouse that has passed away, there's going to be some comparison there. So
Oh,
are
yeah.
you going to, do you think that you're going to look for someone who's a lot like your husband? Or did you realize some things that you're like, maybe I should put down or think about some different options as far as character and personality and just how a person shows up for me? What does that look like for you?
I I don't think I could be with somebody exactly like him. It
Hmm.
just wouldn't feel right
Yeah.
or good. I know that the one of my top requirements would be emotional intelligence.
Mm.
I cannot relive what I went through
Mm.
with Sean, and I cannot bring that into my kids' lives.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you can avoid that. I don't know if there's this clear way of knowing where somebody's mental health is.
Hmm.
Just based on my personal experience, you just never know, right? But I think that there are probably some strong signs that I could look for in somebody that would tell me more about where their mental health care is and how they take care of themselves emotionally and how they connect.
Yeah, and I think that that's important that you say of how they take care of themselves emotionally, because everybody's going to have something, right? And there's a
Mhm.
handful of people who have had wonderful lives and have never experienced any, just, but what's the odds of someone like that falling into anyone's hands, right? I mean,
Right.
it's there, but it's not there. And so I think, like you said, the way that they manage themselves, because you don't want to go into something having to manage someone when you're still trying to manage yourself and how you're managing dating and
Yeah.
managing parenthood, And so as long as someone can manage themselves and also have a good outlook on your children, these, and although you're not going to introduce and integrate in any time soon,
No, yeah.
you have to at least have some sort of, yeah, you're good for me, or it looks good for me, but thinking long term, are you going to be good for my children too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's about my kids, and we talk about dating in our house.
Good.
My kids have brought it up on their own.
Hmm.
I will mention it, and I allow them, I give them the opportunity to tell me what they would look for in
Good.
somebody who might, I don't talk about getting married again
Yeah.
or having another dad, right?
Yeah.
But I we refer to it as somebody who might come into our world,
Mm,
you
I
know?
like that.
And what would we want that person to be like? Who
Yeah.
would we want that person to be? And so I give them opportunities to share because I think that's important, and they're my world. I will not, if there, one day my daughter asked me, "What if you meet a guy and he doesn't like us?" And I said,
That
"What do
broke your
you think?"
heart. That
Right.
breaks my heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually got angry,
Yeah.
thinking of somebody coming into my life and saying he doesn't like my children,
Yeah.
goodbye.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're at least thinking about it and that
Hmm.
you're open to it. And understanding too that there's a process with it all.
Yeah.
Everything is a process.
Yes.
Um, where do you see where do you see your future going? I know that you were going to start your business and kind of open up your mindful, like, was it going to be a practice?
It was going to be just a mindfulness and movement
Like a wellness center
group.
group? Okay.
No, I don't think I was thinking, especially because this was after COVID. So I thought, I
Okay.
don't know if I want to invest in brick and mortar,
Hmm.
but just mindfulness and movement support for children and families. I see this year, I'm actually really excited about
Okay.
2025. I had told you in an email that it's kind of started off rocky. I'm in California. I'm south of the fires,
Yeah.
and so it hasn't been a great start to the year, but overall I'm looking forward to the year. I see a lot of growth personally and professionally, and I'm just seeing more and more how grief is shaping me and the way I want my business to look.
Okay.
And I see how my healing journey is influencing the decisions I'm making about the the things and the services that I want to provide to others.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
right now I am teaching mindfulness again to children and families, locally in Irvine and also virtually.
Okay.
And I want to focus on that. I think there's a lot of potential there. Whether a child is grieving, has mental health challenges, or just wants tools to learn how to ground and balance, I think it's all really important to teach them at an early age. And I think in terms of more of like a holistic grief and wellness space, I would like to do one-on-one. I don't like the word coaching, but I guess that's the word we use. So just
Well, not
one-on-one.
necessarily, because I'm a coach, and
Do
there's a
you
reason
use?
I do it. But tell me why you don't like the word coaching, and let's see if we can find a better word for you.
Oh, I would appreciate that. So for me, when I say coaching, I I want a word that feels more like I'm going through this with you. I'm not, when I think of coach, I think of, okay, you're an expert,
Just go and do it. Yeah.
and you're gonna help me, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
But for me, it's really important to let people know that I'm not an expert
Mhm.
on grief. I'm an expert on my grief, and I'm an expert on my children.
Yeah.
And with my experiences, I will walk alongside you and I will hold your hand and support you, and we'll do this together.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I fear that using the word coach takes away from that
Yeah.
intention, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And you want to use something that's organic to you and organic to your personality, organic to your style. And so while you're saying that, I'm kind of thinking of guide.
Mm-hmm.
Guide is good, but even guide kind of gives that follow me
Mm-hmm.
feel to it as well. And um, come alongside. What are some other words that you feel resonates with you and who you are?
I mean, the first word that came to my mind is friend.
Okay.
Because I feel I make friends easily. My
Okay.
kids laugh because anywhere we go, I'll meet someone once and then say that's my friend.
Yeah.
Um, and I just feel like when you talk to somebody and refer to them as your friend, it immediately creates that sense of connection a little bit deeper than we're working together. It's like
Yeah.
we're working together, but we're moving forward together too.
Yeah.
So
I think I
I
have the word.
what's that?
I think I have the word. What about
Okay,
companion?
I like that.
Mindfulness companion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, because it is that ordeal of I can meet you where you are. We can stand in this together. I'm walking beside you. We're walking beside each other. I'm not guiding you. You're not guiding me. We're just kind of in this together. And I think that as you continue along with your grief journey, um, you will come to an understanding of your grief doesn't have to be, and your loss doesn't have to be like everyone else's. Everyone's loss and the tragedy and the trauma towards it is all different. But what we all do is speak the language of grief. We all feel those emotions of grief, and that's where we meet in the middle and become an expert of it, even though
Mm-hmm.
it's unique to you. But we know the the gut clenching. We know the inability to describe and talk, and all of those things that go along with being on the grief journey. And as you continue on, you may want to continue to be the companion, or you may go into being the guide, because now I've been there. Because everyone that comes across your path, they're going to be on different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And some you can come along with being a companion. The others, I've been there, and I'm going to meet you where you are, and I want you to trust me to guide you through this so that you can get on the other side of whatever level that you're on. So it's going to continue to unfold for you as you go through your journey.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome,
I
definitely.
do like that. And I like what you said about I will meet you where you are
Hmm.
and we'll move forward together because that's how I feel. And I'm so new to this space. I, you know, it was in May that I even came on to social media to share about it was Mental Health Awareness Month, and I felt this urge to get on social media and share my story. And then over time, it's turned into this
Yeah.
grief support, mindfulness teaching journey. And so I do like that. And having said that, I've only been in this for on this journey for a couple of years and I'm new to this space, I also will continue to remind myself that I'm allowed to take my time
Yep.
and kind of see where things go. And I'm okay with that. I'm not in a
Mhm.
rush to have this business set up and running. I'm just kind of feeling it out right now.
Yeah. And it always changes.
Yeah.
Where you are now is not where you're going to be next month or in 6 months, and giving yourself that permission to do so, and not allowing other people either as you go into business, and even as you start collaborations or whatever happens from this journey, not allowing others to put you in a box or to nail
Mm-hmm.
you down to something where you're like, I want to be free flowing. I just got out of a box, and the box is what created this thing that I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, I love that for you. And I'm really anxious to see, well, not anxious to see, but I'm really wanting to see everything that kind of unfolds from you, because
Thank
grief is
you.
one of those things, loss is one of those things that really, it catapults you into your purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, we have to go through these tragedies, the losses, but for the collective of people, which is really everyone, because everyone's going to lose someone.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to be grieving us one day, right? And so, for people who really do the work and really kind of utilize the grief and the loss for services or for others or to show up for others, um, it's it takes you into your purpose. It takes you into what you are supposed to do in this world, for other people who are going to cross your path, people that you are supposed to guide, people who do need to hear your perspective of what grief looks, sounds, and feels like
Mm-hmm.
in your own unique way. So I'm very glad that you are utilizing your pain and turning it into purpose. Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything that we should know coming down the pipeline for you, in the near future?
No, I'm on Instagram under my name, Reshma Kearney, and I share a lot of my story and my husband's story, and I share about the kids, which I am seeing is helpful to people. I'm noticing that people have that's been resonating with people. Um, I'm going to do more virtual mindfulness sessions for kids and families, and my website is supposed to be going live soon.
Okay.
So that will all be on my Instagram. So
Okay.
if and when it goes live, it'll
Okay.
be on there.
Yeah, and all of Reshma's information of how to contact her or how to get with her her mindfulness business will be under the podcast in her bio, so you guys will be able to get in contact with her that way. Um, and I just appreciate you coming into the shadow box, Reshma.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been nice
Definitely.
talking to you.
Awesome. So, everyone else, thank you for coming into the shadow box and sharing this moment with us. We are always appreciative of you. And mindfulness is a thing. And that's the way that we are going to be able to cope with a lot of what we go through in life. So, I really hope that you guys get in touch with Reshma